I wanna be like you. 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 Welcome to another episode of I Wanna Be Like You with Elbi Cespedes. Look how fast. I wonder how fast that went if you listen to it on 0.75 or like two times speed. But I want to cut straight to the chase here. So this week, I got to see Take the Lead at Paper Mill Playhouse. Now, you might know Paper Mill Playhouse because of the fact that in Tommy's episode, he talked about that's where Newsies originated. In Phil's episode, he talked about that's where A Bronx Tale originated, amongst many others like The Great Gatsby, Bandstand, Hercules did a production there, Hunchback of Notre Dame did a production there. So it's a very prominent out-of-town house that does a bunch of world premiere musicals. This year's world premiere musical was Take the Lead. And I've heard about this show for a long time. There's been a lot of buzz about it in the city between workshops and readings, and people have been in for it and whatnot. And it's this fusion between ballroom dancing and breakdancing. And we get to talking about it because today we have Mark Hoebee on the podcast. Now, Mark is the producing artistic director of Paper Mill Playhouse. He's deciding the seasons. He is overseeing all things education at Paper Mill Playhouse. And it's absolutely fascinating because before this, Mark was a director and an actor. And he got to star in Victor Victoria with Julie Andrews. He was in Beauty and the Beast on Broadway. He was in Nick Nora, which we get to talking about. And he also directs pretty much one show every season at Paper Mill, as well as serving as their artistic director for the whole year. And he has so many fascinating stories. We get to talking about how he directed the full Monty starring Elaine Stritch, which was her second to last show that she did before she passed away. Fascinating stuff. I mean, it's crazy. He talks about how he decides what goes into deciding a season at Paper Mill. We talk about their next season. We talk about Take the Lead because at this point, when this episode airs, there will only be 1 week left and you have to see this show. We loved it. So we talk all about that. We talk about Little Mermaid, which is their next show, and their upcoming season. I cannot thank Mark enough for coming on the pod to do this. He brought so much fascinating insight. We were so lucky to have him. And I think you're really going to get a kick out of this episode because I absolutely loved it. It's one of my favorites. So without further ado, today, I want to be like Mark Hoebee. Welcome to another episode of I Want to Be Like You with Elbi Cespedes. Today, I want to be like Mark Hoebee. Mark, thanks so much for doing this. I cannot thank you enough. Yeah, we're big Paper Mill fans in this house, so we feel lucky to be here.
I'm happy to be here with you. I'm happy that you're here.
We start this podcast with the same question every time. Who was your I Want to Be Like You when you were a kid?
Oh my gosh. Well, when I was a kid, I didn't want to be in theater. That wasn't my thing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I wanted to be an Olympic gymnast. So that was my first dream. My goal was to go to the Olympics as a gymnast. Wow.
So who was your person?
Oh my God, I can't even think of their names anymore. This is so long ago. I can't even remember. But yeah, that was what I wanted to do.
Were you in gymnastics as a kid?
Yeah, I started when I was like in 8th grade and did it only for a couple of years, and then I had an injury that sidelined me, and they said, you have to stop doing that, so you have to pick something else to do with your time. And so I used to sing like in the choir and the chorus at school, and so I auditioned for this community theater production of West Side Story when I think I was like 14.
Wow.
And that was my first experience in theater. So that's how I sort of got started.
And you're from Jersey, right?
Yeah, I grew up in Freehold.
Oh, very cool.
Worked at Great Adventure every summer.
No way.
Running rides. I was never in a show.
I was going to say, were you performing? Yeah.
No. I was the king of Kitty Kingdom. I was the manager of the kids section. I ran the flume ride. I did.
Oh my gosh, that's funny. What was your dance history like though?
I didn't study dance as a kid.
Oh really?
I didn't start dancing till really late in life. So my story was this. So I wanted to be a gymnast. They said, okay, I hurt my knee, which now I would have been back on the floor in like 6 weeks. It was nothing. Yeah. But, it was a local doctor who said, you can't ever do that again. So then I auditioned for this community theater production of West Side Story at the Petty School in Hightstown. It was called Theater by the Lake, and I was cast as Baby John. And
Wow.
I met a young woman there whose name was Nancy Anderson. She's still a close friend. And she was a ballet dancer with Princeton Ballet Society. Like, she was a hardcore dancer.
Mm-hmm.
And her mother was an English teacher. And so after we did that summer together, the next school year, she said, listen, my mom is taking a group of our students to go see a Broadway musical. Would you want to go? And I was like, I don't know. I didn't even know anything. I'd never seen a Broadway musical. I'd only seen like one other show in my life. So I said, well, maybe. What's it about? And she said, oh, it's really interesting. It's a show all about dancers and their back life stories and what happens off stage. And I thought, wow, that sounds really boring. But I thought, okay, I'll go. So I got on the yellow school bus and drove in and went to the Schubert Theater and sat like in almost the last row of the balcony and saw the original company of A Chorus Line.
Oh my gosh.
So that moment completely changed my life. I had no idea about dancers or musical theater or anything at that point.
Yeah.
But watching that show completely changed my life. I thought that I was watching a life I hadn't even lived yet be played out on stage. And on the bus, on the way home, I remember going up the helix out of the Lincoln Tunnel and saying to Nancy, I said, that's what I want to do. And she said, what do you mean? I said, I want to dance in the chorus of a Broadway show. That's what I want to do. She was like, well, you've not really studied dance for like 15 years.
A late bloomer.
A little late for that. I said, I don't care. That's what I wanted to do. So all those people, Donna McKechnie, Kelly Bishop, Tommy Walsh, those people who many of them then in my career I got to meet and work with along the way and actually have hired here.
You really?
Yes, Donna McKechnie, who was the original Cassie.
Yeah.
That company changed my life. I said, that's what I'm going to do. So I set my sights on doing that. And then I toured with Donna in the national tour of Sweet Charity, which was Bob Fosse's last show. So I worked with him. And then many, many years later, she came back here and I was the producer. And I employed her in a show, a new musical called Halftime. She was in.
So, that's so
yeah,
funny.
so that was crazy. There she is on my wall right there.
Yeah.
So she's amazing. So just like the best of the best.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's awesome. See, I was gonna ask you what your first Broadway show was, and that
was
huge.
The first Broadway show I ever saw was Chorus Line. It was I wouldn't be here today.
Did you race to get into dance classes and all that
No.
stuff as a teenager?
No, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to do it. My parents weren't in theater. Nothing. I did shows in high school. And then I guess it was like my junior year, I was starting to apply for colleges. And I thought, oh, well, maybe I'll try to be a theater major. And it was much different back then.
Yeah.
There were certain schools that had an audition requirement. A lot of them did not, which is strange. And I wound up...
But they had departments? They didn't have an audition requirement?
Yeah, they had theater departments.
Oh, that's interesting.
So, yeah, like there were a couple that I applied to that I was going to have to audition for, like the York University, which is in Toronto, Canada. And then I applied to Northwestern University. And they didn't even have a musical theater department, but they turned out all these huge stars: Charlton Heston, Anne Margaret, Carol Lawrence, Jerry Orbach. And my mom read this article about that school and said, "Oh, you should apply there." So I did, and it's an incredibly hard school to get into. But I had really, really good grades, and they didn't have an audition requirement. I sent in my resume and I got in off my GPA, and I was actually an acting major at Northwestern University, which is crazy. And that's really when I started to study dance. So this is really crazy. So I guess I was 18 years old. Prior to that, I took one dance class a week, when I was in high school.
Oh my gosh.
Right. And then when I got to college, I thought, oh, I should be a dancer. And that's when I started studying dance. So at 18 years old.
That's
and then
unbelievable.
Fast forward, 10 years later, I was dancing at my first Broadway show.
Wow. So did you have a knack for it right away? Like, were you because you
Yeah.
practiced gymnastics.
I had flexibility. I had balance. I had all the things that you needed to be a dancer.
Right.
Also, I was a guy,
Sure.
and the competition's a lot less.
Yeah.
I was very athletic, and at Northwestern, because there were very few male dancers, I had a lot of opportunity to dance in shows and choreograph, and I learned kind of just by doing shows. And then I stayed a couple summers and studied in Chicago with Lou Conti at the Hubbard Street Dance Company and Gus Giordano. And that in those 4 years at school, which seems crazy, people study from the time they're like 4 years old. But in those 4 years is when I really discovered that I had an aptitude to be a dancer.
Wow.
And then I got out of college and started trying to work.
Wow, very cool. What was your first professional theater job?
My first professional theater job was right after college. There was a theater, it's still there, it's in Warsaw, Indiana, called the Wagon Wheel Playhouse.
Oh.
And
do you know it? You were like nodding like near it.
Yeah, I know Wagon Wheel.
Do you really?
Yeah.
That's funny.
A lot of you, Faith Prince worked there. I mean, a lot of people work there. It's been around forever. And I used to be one of those ones that was under a tent and in the round. Yeah. And one of the directors, this guy named Tom Rowland, who ran a big program at Northwestern, wasn't a teacher there, but was on the staff, was the producer there. And so he hired a split company, half the people after my senior year of college from Northwestern University and half the people from CCM, Cincinnati Conservatory of Music. And we all went there and we did, I think it was 7 shows in 14 weeks.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I wasn't in all 7, but I choreographed a couple. So that was my first job. And I think I made, I'm pretty sure everybody made $200 a week. But I got an extra $25 a week because I was also the choreographer.
That's crazy. What shows? Do you remember what shows you did?
Oh yeah, my first show was 1776.
Oh wow.
Then we did back. Brigadoon, Sweet Charity, Mac and Mabel.
Wow. What did you choreograph?
All of them.
Oh, you choreographed all of them?
Yeah. For $25 extra a week. Yeah, that was my big.
What a deal! What a score!
Yeah. But it was amazing, and so like learning, and one of the shows was Sweet Charity. Yeah. Which then later I would be hired by Bob Fosse to do Sweet Charity. And when I was doing it there, I didn't even know really what the show was. But it was an amazing experience and worked with incredible people. You know, Broadway producer Kevin McCullum is a very good friend because he was John Adams in that production. Yeah. And so, that's how we...
That is so funny. Yeah. What was the job that got you your equity card?
It was shortly after that. I actually choreographed my first show professionally before I got my equity card. So I choreographed a production of Gypsy at the Marriott Lincolnshire Theater outside Chicago. That was my first. I was a non-equity actor, and I got that job first through a connection at Northwestern, Dominic Massini, who was my acting coach. And then a year later, so it was 1983, I think, I was cast at the same theater, Marriott Lincolnshire, in the Carousel. And I was, a dancer boy in the chorus, making minimum, but on an equity contract. Yeah, and it was amazing. And I still remember the phone call with the producer, Kerry Walker. I didn't have an agent, I didn't have anything. And he called. This is back when you had phones, and I called him from a payphone in the Holiday Inn in Evanston, Illinois. Returned his call, and he said, "How badly?" He was from Texas. "How badly do you want to do the show?" And I said, "I really want to do it bad. Do you want to do it for minimum?" And I was like, "Yes." So that was my first job.
Oh wow, very cool. How did you get your first agent? Did you have an agent before then?
No, I didn't have an agent until very late in my career.
Oh really?
Until I was a director. Oh. I did 10 Broadway shows and national tours and worked all over the country.
So you were able to book these Broadway shows without an agent?
Without an agent.
That's incredible.
Because back in the day, we're talking now, I moved to New York in 1987. So it was like the late 80s and through the 90s. Yeah. And I know the term, we don't say the term gypsy anymore, but that truly was what it was. There was groups of dancers who sort of wore that as a badge of honor. I know it's a controversial term now. Sure. No disparaging, nothing disparaging to the Romani people, but I was among a group of dancers who got known by casting agents, and so we worked from show to show. We didn't need agents, so there was a point in my career just a couple of years in after I'd done like maybe 2 Broadway shows where I didn't even go to open calls anymore. The casting agents would just invite me
Reach out to you.
to invited calls, and that's how I got hired by, Jerome Robbins was my first Broadway show, and Susan Stroman and Rob Marshall and all those people, they got to know me through casting agencies and being in the room. So now you've got to have every dancer, everybody has an agent. But I didn't have an agent until I actually gave up dancing and was pursuing directing.
Oh wow!
That's when I got my first agent.
When was Jerome Robbins Broadway?
Jerome Robbins Broadway opened in February of 1989.
And that's your Broadway debut. That was
like my Broadway debut.
Do you remember do you remember the phone call? Do you remember
I remember everything about it because I auditioned for the show, I think 8 or 10 times. And this is very crazy, but halfway through the process of auditioning, they switched casting agents. And I was in the final group for a long, long time. And then they switched casting agents. And at the next call, I wasn't called in. And I didn't make the original company. And I still think something went funky there, but whatever. Yeah. So they hired the original company, which was in rehearsal for 6 months. They rehearsed that show for 6 months.
Wow.
Because they rehearsed every show that Jerome did, that pieces were used for that show. So when they were trying to figure out what they were going to do from Fiddler, they rehearsed all the numbers of Fiddler. They learned all the numbers. So they learned all the numbers from On the Town, all the numbers from,
nuts.
King and I. Yeah. And then he would pick and choose. So anyway, I kept auditioning. So I would go, there was a place called 890 Broadway, the Michael Bennett Studios, very famous. 5 floors of studios where all the Broadway shows rehearsed and auditioned. And I would go there all the time and audition. I kept auditioning while they were in rehearsal. And when they opened in New York in February, I think there were close to 60 people in the company. And they didn't have enough swings. They only had 10 swings. So right after the Broadway opening, they hired 4 more people. And they called me up and they said, would you like to be a swing for Jerome Robbins Broadway? And I said, sure, yeah, what's that? I didn't know what a swing was. And they were like, you cover the ensemble men. And I was like, I didn't care. I was like, yes, great. Yeah, oh my God, amazing. Yes, I want to do it. So I'll never forget, I went and I signed my contract, Manny Eisenberg's office, and they gave me a standing room ticket to go see the show. And I was like, not even a seat. But anyway.
And couldn't even get me, I'm going to be in this show.
Right, I know. I got to stand in the back. But anyway, so I said, while I'm watching the show today, who am I covering? Like, what should I be watching? They said, well, you cover all the men. So I just watch the show. So I was watching the show, and the first segment was On the Town, all the sailors. And I was like, wow, this is amazing, so exciting. And then the next number, I think, was Charleston, and then something else. I can't remember, the Out Forum. But by the time we got to West Side Story, which was the West Side Story suite at the end, which was Dance at the Gym, America, The Rumble, the Somewhere Ballet, the prologue, all of that. I was sweating to death. I couldn't enjoy the show anymore because I was like, how am I going to cover all these people? I had to cover 23 men.
Oh, my God.
And I went on for every single one of them.
No way.
Oh, yes. And I was on all the time. The 14 swings we were always on, like almost every day. And it was run because it was Jerome Robbins, right? And he ran it kind of like a ballet company. So there was a company of like 50-some people on stage or something like that. I can't remember the numbers. But when one person was out, one person didn't replace their whole track. So Scott Weiss, who's still a good friend, won the Tony. And he was in, I remember he was in, I think he was in 9 slots throughout the show. But I wasn't the first cover for all 9. I was like the first cover for like 6. So I would do 6 of those and 3 other people would be in other stuff. But there were many nights that I would go on and in the course of one night be 6 or 7 different people.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Sometimes in the middle of a suite.
And so were you like split tracking?
All the time.
All
constantly.
the time.
Like in segments. So you'd be in Fiddler and you'd be one person in the opening number, then in the dream you'd be somebody else.
Oh my goodness.
It was split up like that. So it was crazy, but challenging. I loved it.
Yeah.
It was scary at first.
Yeah, I'm sure. That sounds like I'm hearing it right now. And I'm
Right,
like,
you get angry.
oh man, yeah.
But I actually loved it, and I got the nickname of King Swing because I was on so much and knew so much. They wanted to make me a dance captain because I knew so much. I just loved it, and I could absorb it all, and it was my favorite thing. I always wanted to be on more. I was like, put me on.
Yeah.
It can be scary, but it was great because then I was never scared to do anything.
I was going to say, you kind of did the scariest, the hardest thing.
And also the whole company, because the swings were on all the time, and there were so many internal covers, everybody covered somebody else. So you never really knew who your partner was going to be.
Right.
And a lot of times you wouldn't meet your partner until you were on stage, because there wasn't time, right? At half hour, they'd call out the 12 people that were out that night, and you'd have to run down, and all the understudies and the swings would be looking at the sheets to see who you were on for, and then you'd run out and dance at the gym, and I'd be like, oh, hey, yeah, I'm Kelly Patterson today. You'd be like, yeah, great, we're partners. I mean, we'd be talking on stage like that.
Oh,
that's
my
the way we got through
gosh.
it. But it was great because it was a very supportive atmosphere.
Yeah.
People helped each other through, and you never knew who your partner was going to be.
Wow.
So
That
it was exciting.
That's terrifying.
Terrifying, but I wouldn't trade it for
yeah, right.
for
As your first show.
And then I knew I was a good swing. I eventually became a dance captain.
Yes.
And it was my sort of key to success on Broadway was I wasn't the greatest singer. I could sing and I could act okay, but I was a killer dancer, and I would always go to the dance call, make it through, come back in and sing. And when I was done singing, I would always say, I'm a great swing and a great dance captain. I love to do it. And so that's how I got a lot of my gigs.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
So is that how you got Nick Nora?
Nick and Nora. Nick and
See,
Nora.
you say the words Nick and Nora, and there's some haunting presence that's in the room now.
Nick and Nora was, that could have been such a good show. It was such a funny show.
Yeah.
Completely non-PC, like just
Yeah.
over the top, in the way like Book of Mormon is.
Yes,
right?
sure.
Like really, really funny.
Yeah.
And it was the problem was it was written, directed, and produced by Arthur Lawrence.
Yes.
So he was the guy. He had all the power, and that's not good.
Mm.
So the show that we went into rehearsal with was really funny, but we opened right on Broadway.
Right.
And as they kept fixing it, it kept falling apart, and it got worse and worse and worse. That was an interesting story.
We should say this is Charles Strauss, Richard Maltby Jr., Arthur Lawrence.
And Joanna Gleason, Barry Bostwick, Faith Prince, Deborah Monk. It was like
Crazy.
Killer cast.
Yeah.
It's right there. It's the only Broadway show poster that has my name on it as a performer. Now as a producer, they're on them. And it's considered one of the biggest flops of all time. And
Right, yeah.
It's hanging at Joe Allen.
I should say in full disclosure, because I want to shout them out too, is that I listened to you talk about it on the Closing Night podcast.
Yeah.
Which was, it's if you haven't listened to it, the whole episode is fascinating because they talk about every little facet of like why this show flopped.
Why it fell apart.
And you were the dance captain.
I was the dance captain. Yes, I did go on. My biggest thing was that they hired an actress who did not want to portray the role the way Arthur was directing it, so they were going to fire her. But before they could fire her, because we were in previews, they had to hire somebody else. So I would go to the Marquee Theater and check in to make sure that the show was ready to go. We previewed for like 10 or 12 weeks.
I was going to say, you guys had
forever.
Yeah.
We almost had the record. Spider-Man.
But
until that time, it was Merlin, and then we were one shy of Merlin. But anyway, so I would go to the Marquee, check in, make sure everybody was on, and then I would go across the street to the Lunt Fontaine, which was empty at the time, and rehearse this new person and the understudy who were going in. And then I remember it was a Saturday matinee before the show. They brought this young lady in, and you can look it up. I just don't want to use names. And they fired her, and the new person went in, and the swing went on. So that was a crazy, crazy time.
And it didn't last very long.
No,
I mean, that's like
once it opened,
you guys opened and then you closed.
Yeah, we opened on a Sunday night, and it closed the next week. We went in on Tuesday, and the closing notice was up. It was my first Broadway show that I was at opening night, and I was so excited about it.
Right.
And I'll never forget, my parents were there, and we had the party at Sardi's, and we went across the street, and this is, again, back in the day before cell phones or anything, and at 10:30, the New York Times, the printed version would come out and people would run down the block to get it. And I remember sitting at Sardi's, and at 10:30, the people ran out to get it, and by like 10:45, it was me and my parents, and everybody else had left because the reviews were so bad.
Gosh.
And it was a shame because it was so many talented people, but, you know, Faith, that was our second show together, and we got to be good friends, and I, you know, met Deborah Monk and still hang out with her. Like, it could have been really funny. And there was a funny number where Faith Prince was actually dead. She was killed in the show, but the whole show was about trying to figure out who killed her. So she was in the show because they kept reliving all this stuff, and she would get killed in all these scenes. But there was one number where she was like rolling on the floor, and these people were kicking her downstage. And as they were staging that, I had to stand in for her as the dance captain. And none of these people were dancers. Deb Monk, none of them.
Yeah.
And so they kept actually kicking me.
Oh my God.
I was like all bruised on my ribs. But anyway.
That's crazy.
Crazy, whatever.
So Nick and Nora finishes. I mean,
Does it feel like when you finish a show like that, I mean, like there's it's disheartening, and it's also like it's one of those things where you're like, do you feel like you're gonna work again? You know what I mean? Like,
I think it's devastating because even when you're in a show that you know is not great, you invest so much time and energy and passion.
Right.
And like that was a show with A-list people in it, right?
Yeah.
It should have worked.
Mm-hmm.
There's a million reasons why it didn't work, but
Yeah.
yes, it's incredibly depressing because as performers, especially when you're on, you know, you get lucky enough to be booked in a Broadway show, you think, oh my God, this is amazing, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm going to be sitting on Broadway for years.
Yeah.
Or at least that's the hope, or at least a year or something.
Right.
And when it closes in a week, you have nothing.
And you're
And you
hunting for
haven't
new
planned anything. You haven't had time to go to auditions. You are starting over from, you know,
Scratch.
jump.
Yeah.
Nothing. Like when you're in a long running Broadway show and you can audition for other stuff,
prep,
or maybe you can leave and you can, you know, line something else up, or even like when I was on tour on the road, I'd fly back for auditions. So you could try to set yourself up, but there's nothing.
You're very much in the thick of it.
Yes, and there's nothing that prepares you for a show that's going to open and close in a week.
Yeah.
Then what do you do? Like you start over, right? You just totally start over.
Yeah. Well, that's a big part of what we talk about is like there's this notion that like once you book Broadway, all your questions are answered, and it's
My partner Larry says this all the time. When I got Jerome Robbins, he was like, he goes, "Wow, this is really great." I know it. I said, "I was so excited." He said, "No, because you worked in Chicago and you did like dinner theater, and then you did all these national tours, and so now you'll just always work on Broadway." And I was like, "That's not how it works."
Yeah.
He's not in show business. He works for CBS News, but
Well, I had this guy once tell me he works in sanitation, and he was like, "So is it just like you book Broadway and then they put you where they want you?" Like because he's thinking the way sanitation works,
like
it's like
union.
you get put, you get put at different. Hey, today you're on 56th Street today.
Right.
So imagine you book Broadway and they're like, hey, tonight you'll be in Aladdin.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay.
No. And you are a union, like you. Yeah. That's not far fetched.
Yeah, right. It's not a crazy idea, but it's pretty funny. You know?
And it's crazy to think that you could be. Look at the Donna McKechnie story, right?
Yeah.
Major star, big breakout, Cassie Corsline, and then a couple of years later, didn't really work. And actually wound up going back into the show. I had an amazing career and one of the most talented women I've ever seen, but it's not a guarantee.
Yeah.
And it's not a ladder. And it's not linear.
Yeah.
It's up, down, all over the place.
Right.
It's a roller coaster all the
right.
time. And you got to have a stomach for it.
Your next show Beauty and the Beast after Nick Nora?
You probably know better than I should have looked at my resume.
Because Beauty and the Beast is 94 and Nick Nora is 91.
91. So, yeah, I feel like I did a national tour in between. Maybe the Guys and Dolls tour.
Sure.
I think maybe, but Beauty and the Beast was my next.
And you originated that? You originated
No,
Beauty and the Beast?
I was the first replacement. So they did the Broadway company.
Okay.
And then the dance captain, who was a swing, here I am again as a swing, was going to get ready to prep the LA company, which was going to become the first national. Yeah. So they hired me. I was the first replacement. I went in as the swing and then eventually took over the coveted role of Pepper Shaker.
Nice.
Yes. So I did Pepper Shaker, which was great. And that was another one. I mean, landing that show.
Yeah.
Oh, it's true. I was on the road with Guys and Dolls because when I was on the road with Guys and Dolls, and that was a great company. Andy Blankenbuehler was in that company.
What?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, he and I danced together. I met him at his very first audition in New York City, very first one, for that national tour of Chorus Line. When the Broadway company closed, and they sent out this big national tour, and Andy and I met at Radio City Music Hall, hundreds and maybe thousands of people there trying to get into the national tour of Chorus Line. Right. And what I like to say is I booked it and he didn't. But that's the only thing I have up on Andy. He's a good buddy, but he did fine. But anyway, yeah. So I did that. I can't remember what we were talking about.
Guys and Dolls.
Right. When we were on the road together dancing in Guys and Dolls, that's when Beauty and the Beast was auditioning, and nobody wanted to go in for it.
Why?
There had never been a Disney musical on Broadway before. So everybody was thinking those park shows, like big cartoon heads. And everybody was like, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
But agents were saying, you got to go in, you got to do it. And then when the show opened, it was
a sensation.
Magical. I mean, I remember watching it. I saw it before I went into it and thinking, this is an amazing show. Not a kid's show,
right.
A show that kids enjoy, but the magic was spectacular. Sets, costumes, the whole... Alan Menken, who I've now worked with a million times, just love him. Such a powerful story. Like you really you want those objects to be human again. And then I got into that.
Was there a whole talk about how much did the whole Giuliani changing New York come into play with Beauty and the Beast coming? Was that a thing that came subsequently, or was that like all together?
I think it was all around the same time, and it was a lot of people refer to it as the Disneyification
of New York. Yeah.
And I think a lot of that happened when they had opened Beauty and the Beast, which ran at the Palace, but then the Disney Corporation bought the New Amsterdam, which was on 42nd Street, and renovated it, and that's when Giuliani was cleaning up all the porn shops that were down there, and they moved a couple of the old theaters and made them movie theaters and stuff like that. So it was a combined effort, but it really was, bringing families back to the city and making it a safe place to walk from Port Authority, take the bus in, walk down 42nd Street, and then go see an incredible
especially
show
for kids.
Like Beauty and the Beast.
And I think that a big part of it too is like the whole idea that if the lights had to stay on, like that was like the big thing was that you can't shut off the lights.
No.
That if there's no shade, there's nothing shady can happen. That's like a big part of the notion of
true
of keeping the lights on, and it still is that way.
I know it's true. It's true.
Yeah,
100%.
So talk to me about booking Beauty and the Beast then. So you go in.
Okay. So I went in. This is funny. I had auditioned for a national tour of Me and My Girl. Mm-hmm. And I was on stage at the marquee where the show was playing, but the national tour was out on the road. And I thought I was getting the job. It was down to the last end of the call. 2 people left on stage, me and one other guy, and they brought me into the stage manager's office. They said, try on this jacket. Mm-hmm. And I tried it on. It was too small. And they were like, okay, thanks. And then the other guy tried it on and it fit him, and he got the job. And I was like, what the heck was that? Well, I didn't know, but they were replacing this guy, Dan Mojica, who has since passed, sorry. But he was a sweet man. And they wanted somebody to replace him in the national tour, knowing the tour was closing. They didn't want to build new costumes.
Oh, wow.
So I get the call for Beauty and the Beast to go in and be the replacement Swing. And who's playing that role? Dan Mojica.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my God. So he and I knew each other, and I called him up and I said, what do I have to do to book this gig? And he said, well, you got to have a solid G. So I found a song, Something's Coming, in the movie key, which is a step down, and rehearsed that and killed the dance audition and got it. But then I knew I had to wear all his costumes, and that's what lost me the other job. So for like 2 weeks before I went in, I didn't eat. I like lost all this weight, and they're like, "How's that fitting?" I'm like, "No, it's fine.
It fits perfect.
Great."
Yeah.
But anyway, so then I actually got that part, got in the show.
Oh my gosh.
And then they started making me clothes because I was gonna stay.
This is the pepper shaker costume?
No. This was Swing. So I had to cover all these roles.
Yeah.
And then
I'm like, they're really so specific about the pepper shaker
I
costume.
know. No. So then I was Swing for a couple months, and then the pepper shaker, this guy Jack Hayes, gave us notice, and they asked me if I would like to take over that role, and I was like, yes, of course, I would love to. So,
and so then you're not a Swing anymore.
No, I was no longer Swing. I was the pepper shaker.
You're just pepper shaker.
Just pepper shaker.
Yeah,
which was amazing. And then this is the story that leads me to my next Broadway show, which was Victor Victoria.
Yeah.
So I was so thrilled to be in Beauty and the Beast because I thought, this is my bank job, right? This show's gonna run forever. and I am going to stay with it until it closes, right? It hadn't even been open a year, and I was already had moved through swing up to an onstage position. I thought, I can stay in this for 10 years, right?
Right.
So I'm walking down the street, and I walk right into Rob Marshall. And I said, hey, Rob, how are you? And he's like, great, how are you? And we had never worked together, but I'd auditioned for him a lot of times. Damn Yankees and a couple of his other shows, Little Me. And he knew me and he liked me. I just never booked it. And he said, what are you doing? I said, oh, I'm doing Beauty and the Beast now. I just got, I was a swing, and now I'm going to be a pepper shaker. And I just signed my contract. I said, what are you doing? It was just funny. I just signed my contract too. I said, what are you doing? He goes, well, I'm going to be choreographing this new Broadway show, Victor Victoria, starring Julie Andrews. And I was like, oh, great, good for you. And he was like, good for you. And we left. And like 2 days later, I get a phone call. Again, I didn't have an agent. And it was the casting director for Victor Victoria. And they said, Rob Marshall would like you to come in and audition for Victor Victoria. It's the final callbacks tomorrow. And I was like, well, all right,
Oh my gosh.
sure. I said, okay. I didn't care because I had this dream job working for Disney. Like, it was all the things.
Yeah.
And so I was like, so I went, it was at a theater. I can't remember, maybe the Longacre. It was on stage. And this is what happens, right? You don't care. You don't need the job. Not nervous about it. I was like at a party. It was all my friends, people I knew, people I'd worked with before. We were all like joking around. Cynthia Rubio was his assistant, I knew from Jerome Robbins, all these people. And, killed the dance call, went in, sang, blah, blah. It was great. And I left and I did not even think about it. Yeah. And I went to Beauty and the Beast. Honestly, it was the next night. And I was in my dressing room, which was like on the 9th floor. And I hear over the loudspeaker, Mark Harvey, can you come to the stage manager's office? So I said, sure. So I went down. And Matt West, who was the choreographer for Beauty and the Beast, is sitting in the stage manager's office with his arms folded. And he's looking at me, and he said, so, I hear you're going to get offered Victor Victoria. And are you going to take that show, or are you going to stay with us? And I was like, what?
Oh,
I said,
gosh.
What? I don't even know what you're talking about. He said, well, I heard rumors that you're going to get it, and I just want to know if you're going to take it or you're going to stay in our show. And I said, well, I haven't even gotten a call yet. I did go to this audition, but I don't know, and I love Beauty and the Beast. I really love it. I want to stay. So I thought, I don't want to make him mad.
Yeah.
I don't want to make that company mad. I was like freaking out. And so, I went and I did the show, and then the next day I did get this call. And I get a call, and they're like, Rob would like you to be his dance captain and be a swing for Victor Victoria. Now, the word on the street was that Victor Victoria was not going to be so good.
Sure.
Because
the movie was already out.
The movie was out, but they didn't have the rights to all the Mancini music that was in the film. They had Frank Wildhorn writing, so it was not a slam dunk.
Right.
It was Julie Andrews' return to Broadway,
Yeah.
but the show was not like a slam dunk.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking to myself, okay, I can stay with Beauty and the Beast probably for, the next 10 years, or I can go work with Julie Andrews and Rob Marshall and be his dance captain, and maybe it'll be another Nick and Nora, right?
Yeah, right.
But when am I going to get the opportunity to work with those people again?
Yeah.
So I gave my notice at Beauty and the Beast, right?
And this is what, like, how long?
I had
like
only been there
week?
like 6 months.
Oh, okay. Because you were
Yeah,
a swing.
I had been a swing for a while.
It was the pepper
I was a
shaker that you were for,
vacation
like,
swing, then I was a swing, then I was pepper.
Yeah.
So it was like I joined the company like in, I don't know, late spring, and this was...
But this is very shortly after you signed the pepper shaker contract.
Correct. Yeah, I think I'd been in the show as pepper shaker like
a month. Yeah, that's crazy.
So anyway, and I was really conflicted because I thought this could be a big mistake.
Yeah.
It wasn't, though. I mean,
No,
I
love
love
it.
Beauty, and I wished I could have gone back to it, and I just love that show. But
Yeah.
Victor Victoria was amazing, and working alongside Rob Marshall and being in the room with him and side by side with Blake Edwards and getting to know Julie right there, right?
Yeah.
Who's friendly and good
You have
friend.
a picture of the two of you back there too.
Yes, this was my final performance of the show when I left the show.
We'll post that picture.
Which was really amazing and spectacular. And the truth is, Had I not taken that job, I wouldn't be running Paper Mill Playhouse.
Oh my gosh, what? Explain that.
Okay, so this is a little convoluted.
And then we'll go back because I
All
want
right.
to talk about Julie Andrews.
Yeah, I will. The same time I was working as a dancer in New York and on the road, I was working in Chicago as a director and choreographer.
Uh-huh.
So I was doing shows out there as a director and choreographer known out there, but a performer in New York. And I kept thinking, I can't be a dancer forever. I have to figure out a way to get people in New York to know me as a director or a choreographer. But there was no internet. It was hard to get that done. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was offered a job in Chicago directing a production of Dreamgirls.
Mm-hmm.
So it was hugely successful. It was really great. And the former executive director here saw that production and loved it.
Mm.
And he and the artistic director called me up, again, no agent, and said, remember that Southern guy I said, do you want to work for minimum? Yeah, Kerry Walker. He's the one who said, oh, you should hire Mark Hoebee to direct your production of Dreamgirls. So they called me up and they said, would you like to direct Dreamgirls at Paper Mill Playhouse? And I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, are you kidding me? Amazing. But that was when I was in Victor Victoria in the out-of-town tryout as the dance captain in the swing.
Oh my gosh.
We were in Minneapolis and Chicago, and before we came to New York. And the opening nights were the same day. Dreamgirls opening night at Paper Mill was the same day Victor Victoria was opening on Broadway. So I went to Rob Marshall and I said, Robbie, I think I have to quit the show. And he's like, what are you talking about? We haven't even opened yet. I said, well, Rob started as a director here at Paper Mill.
Oh, I didn't know
He directed Chess here. And I said, that's where you started your directing career. And I've been offered this opportunity to direct Dreamgirls at Paper Mill. And I don't know how I can turn it down. That's my ticket. And he said, let me think about it. Let me talk to the producers. Let me figure it out. And he came back to me and he said, take the job, but I want you to stay with Victor Victoria. I said, well, how's that going to work?
Yeah, right.
He said, we're going to give you a month leave of absence. We have another male swing, and Cynthia's my associate. She's going to be in the show. She can act as the dance captain. So you will miss the whole preview period and the opening night of Victor Victoria on Broadway. But then the day after, you'll come back to the show.
Wow.
And I was like, whoa. I couldn't believe it. So yes. So
It's like forever indebted to Rob Marshall.
unbelievable. But he was a great guy. We were very similar personalities and types. We went through the ranks the same way. You know, he became who he is now, filmmaker, Rob Marshall and everything. But he, started directing at Paper. He knew what this opportunity meant, and he knew that I couldn't afford not to do it. But he also wanted me to stay with Victor Victoria.
Incredible.
So I did. And so eventually, that is the connection that led me to working here and to eventually becoming producing artistic director and producing
incredible.
These new musicals.
Well, I think that too, though, like even though there's a line between like yes and there's personal involved. Like I don't want you to leave my show.
Right,
you know
right,
what I
right,
mean?
yeah.
So I think it's kind of a testament to who he is to remove that and be like, you know what, you should go take your opportunity.
It was that he was really protecting my future career, and there were a lot of other people who would say, no, you make the decision, you stay with the show or you leave,
I'd
whatever.
say most people would say that. Yeah.
But he was like, no, you need to do both of these jobs, because the Dreamgirls thing is a one-time gig, right? And Victor Victoria hopefully is going to have a long run, and you need that. And I wanted to work for him and wanted to work with him, and he understood how important that was. So it's still to this day, I just can't believe that happened.
Yeah.
That I had my opening night here at Paper Mill, and then the next day went to the dressing room, which was like exploded with flowers and gifts, and I missed the opening night. But I was like, didn't care. I was in the show. Yeah.
What was the reception like for Victor Victoria for opening night?
Well, I wasn't there.
Well, yeah, right, yeah.
But the reviews, the reviews were kind of up and down. I mean,
Yeah.
Julie was amazing, and Blake was just a love. And Blake had never directed a Broadway show before, and so he didn't really understand how to do it. He's so smart, so funny. Thank God he had Rob at his side to sculpt the show. And if Blake had let Rob was just the choreographer.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Okay,
Yeah,
I thought he had.
but if he had let Rob take more of the reins, the show would have been a lot better. Because Blake was learning on his feet. But watching, Blake and Julie and Rob and Tony Roberts and Rachel York and Michael Nori, and working with those people in the room, crafting this show, which was actually really good. And Julie was amazing in it, and such a down-to-earth person. Like, you know, I mean, she's like one of the biggest stars in the galaxy,
world,
right?
yeah.
Amazing. But like when you sit and talk to her, she's just like a regular person, and worked as hard as everybody else. Like no entitlement at all. It was always, she was always calling me into her dressing room saying, Mom, give me notes. What am I doing wrong? What can I do better?
No way.
And I was like, no, Julie, you're perfect. Everything you do is amazing. But she was like, she was so solid. She was so amazing. But you know, that was a once in a lifetime opportunity to be involved in that group.
Yeah,
and
of course.
you know the story where they were going to hand her the Tony Award.
I was gonna say, this is the story I would love for you to tell, because this is a fascinating story.
Okay, so you know the show opened and it was spectacular. Robin Wagner built this gorgeous set that got applause every night. When there was this hotel unit that looked like the exterior of a French square, and it turned and became a hotel and moved downstage, and it was musically driven, and when it all came together, the audience burst into applause every night. Willa Kim costumes, you know, fabulous performances by Rachel York as you know, the Leslie Ann Warren role, right?
Oh,
she
wow.
was amazing. Tony Roberts, like, and Rob Marshall's incredible choreography. Jules Fisher and Peggy Eisenhower, their lighting, and the only nomination for the whole show was Julie Andrews.
Crazy.
And she was really hurt by that. No, nothing for Blake, nothing for anything else. And so she decided, I mean, everybody knew she was going to win it. It didn't matter who else was up against it. Julie Andrews returned to Broadway. You're going to give her the Tony Award. And she was great. So, and she said, I'm not going to do it. And she walked out on stage after the show, and I remember running out to the front of the theater. I took all these photos and took pictures, and they had the press there, and she said, you know, I'm going to withdraw or turn down the nomination. And she said, it's not that important to me. I'll never forget. It was the first time I'd ever heard the word egregiously. I was like, what is that? She said, I prefer instead to stand with my egregiously overlooked, I can't remember, she said comrades or compatriots or whatever. And, you know, she held hands with Rachel and Tony, and she turned down the award. She didn't need it. She didn't need it. She felt more, I think, a part of that company and of the Broadway community. She didn't need, you know, a statue. She didn't need to prove herself.
That's unbelievable. I mean, it's like such a testament to who she is. That's kind of amazing.
And even on top of that, she treated everybody incredibly. She redecorated the whole backstage of the Marquis Theater, and on the landing of each of the flights of stairs, every week there were fresh flowers brought in, and she sent Christmas cards. She you know, did incredibly wonderful things for everybody. She really cared. Like she's not a diva. She's a legend.
Yeah.
I'll tell you one other quick story.
Yeah, do it. Absolutely.
So, you know, I stayed in touch with Julie and Blake, and actually got to direct 7 productions of Victor Victoria after that, because Blake sort of.
And you did the tour.
Yeah, I directed the tour. Or directed 2 tours, 5 regional productions, including one here. Blake gave me the mantle as director. To guard the show and to take care of it, and it was an amazing legacy. No.
Okay.
But anyway, so Julie wrote a book years ago, the first half of her life, her memoir, and you know, I bought it, and it's amazing. And Larry, my partner, called me up and he said, Julie's doing a book signing down in Union Square, and we should go see her. And I said, no, I don't want to do that. He was like, yeah, no, it'll be great. We'll go see her. And I said, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be in like throngs of thousands of people. Just a few months before, a friend of ours had died, and Julie invited 10 people to dinner, and I was one of the people she invited. And I said, Larry, that's what I want to guard as my memories and relationship with her. And he said, oh, come on, let's go. So I said, okay. So we decided to go. We get there. It's Barnes & Noble. We walk in with our 2 kids, Larry and I, and they said, oh, well, do you have a wristband? We're like, well, no. They said, oh, well, wristbands were given out at 10 a.m., and so you can't get into the event. I was like, oh, okay. Right. So I said, Larry, let's leave. And he goes, no, let's wait. He goes, there's like this black SUV pulling up out in front. I wonder if it's her. And I was like, I'm sure it's her. So security comes into Barnes & Noble, pushes everybody out of the way. She comes in, her signature baseball cap, her head down. She's like walking through, and I was in the crowd, and I said, Jules, which is what her friends call her. And she like looked up, and she was like, oh, Mark, what are you doing here? And she like came over, and I said, well, we came to the event, but I said, we don't have wristbands. And she goes, you come with me. Larry, she always remembered everybody's names, brought the kids, took us backstage into Barnes & Noble. We went to where her dressing area was. We sat for like a half an hour while she's getting made up, talking, chatting, all this stuff.
And your kids are with you too.
Yes.
They're meeting Mary Poppins.
Totally right. Oh. So I have this great picture of all of us where my daughter's like, who? She was like 8. And then they're like, we have to go. The event's upstairs. So she takes us up. They sit us in the front row. She's talking about the book, talking about that. And then like we were the first ones in line to get a signed copy. And, you know, kisses and hugs, and we left. And then we went home that night. I remember laying in bed watching the news, and on the news they did a story about Julie and her book signing, and they showed this whole thing. And I said, Larry, you know what's so funny and what's so amazing is that Julie Andrews is the Julie Andrews everybody knows, but that's not the Julie that we got to spend time with, right? She was just like regular old Julie Andrews, right? And when she directed that show, the Mousical, the Great American Mousical, that
she just did it like a year ago.
And she
before
did,
then too.
Yeah, she did one a while ago up at Goodspeed, and so I took my son up to see it, and we hung out with her a little bit, you know, at intermission, and she's just like a real legend because she is a real person. She is a hardworking actor. She's everything you would ever want her to be. She's Mary Poppins and more.
Right.
She's
just that's lovely.
Yeah.
That's so like, that's lovely.
Really.
And during Victoria, she was losing her voice. Like, was it towards the end of the run?
It was, you know, when we were in rehearsal, she wore a body mic in the studio because she hadn't performed 8 shows a week. She'd done concerts, but it's a different thing.
Right.
And so it was very strenuous on her. You know, we were out of town in Minneapolis. Then we came back to New York and rehearsed. Then we went to Chicago. We came back and rehearsed. And then it went to New York, and she did 8 shows a week. And so, you know, it was a stress. She had gallbladder surgery. She had some other things that happened, and she called them swellings. You know, I guess pre-nodes on her cords, and so she had to leave the show, and then she had the infamous surgery that did not go well.
Right.
Very sad, but you know, we talked to her about it at one point afterwards, and she's done interviews about it too. She discovered a whole nother part of her life, a career as a writer and children's author, and just amazing relationship with her daughter Emra, and
which she's still doing. Yeah,
and she said if she'd been singing had been her whole life, she probably still would have done that and might have missed out on some other opportunities. So I always think about that. I always think about, you know, even when something goes really wrong for you and you think something's really bad, and like for her to lose your voice, like what possibly could be worse? So look for the next opportunity, right? There's always an opportunity if you can just pick your head up, and that's sort of been kind of a theme for me in my career too, is just to try to say yes and learn as much as I can from the moment in the room, and you never know. Like the Richard Maltby thing. I met him, you know, I choreographed a production of Baby. That's how I got into Nick Nora.
It's all like this like serendipitous thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to talk about Paper Mill.
Yeah.
Paper Mill. Tell me if this this small little theater called Paper Mill Playhouse that we're at right now.
Yeah.
I looked this up. I don't know where I found this. I don't know if this is true or not. Did you do Oklahoma here in 1992?
I didn't remember the year, but yes.
Was that your first experience with Paper Mill?
Yes, I was third cowboy from the left.
Wow. So was Christian in a production at one point. Yeah. Fred.
So you know the role. You're in the back, hat off.
Yeah. You guys have like a fraternity.
Yeah, there you go. I wasn't even like the dream curly understudy. I was nobody. I was just cowboy. And I auditioned here. Yes, I was in the chorus of Oklahoma in 1990.
Little did you know.
Funny story.
I mean, really, only 10 years later, you became the artistic director, am I right?
No. It was 2010 I became the artistic director.
Okay, so a little longer.
And I started working here in 2000. But the Oklahoma story is pretty interesting because when they called me to direct Dreamgirls, they didn't remember I was there.
That you had already done Oklahoma.
They had no idea. And so
How could they forget?
Oh, I was pivotal in that production. No, but I didn't tell them either because I wanted them to think of me as a director.
Yeah.
So I did not say anything. But on opening night, I said to the artistic director and the executive director, I said, I worked here before. Because the show, Dreamgirls, was a huge success. And they said, what? I don't remember that. And I said, I was in the chorus of Oklahoma. And they were like, oh. But, I didn't want somebody to think of me as a chorus boy. I wanted to be thought of as a director.
So, right.
So, yes, that was my first gig here.
So so you became the artistic director in 2010. What was your role before then?
Well, I was a freelance director.
Okay.
And so I was directing around the country, and I directed a couple shows at Paper Mill, and then I was going to go teach at Northwestern, my alma mater, and I came to Paper Mill in this very office, sat right on this side of that very desk, and needed an affidavit from them to say I'd be a good college professor because I didn't have enough experience.
Sure.
And they said, what are you talking about? I said, well, I'm going to move back to Chicago with my son and my partner and teach at Northwestern. And they said to me, wait a minute, hold on, don't go anywhere. And the executive producer left the room, and I was sat here by myself for like 20 minutes, like looking at the walls. And then they came back and they actually offered me a job. They said, we don't want you to leave. We want to offer you a job on staff at Paper Mill as a kind of resident director. I was called the associate director.
Okay.
So I went to this interview at Northwestern, actually already having a job here at Paper Mill.
Wow.
And that's how I started in the year 2000. I was on the artistic staff as kind of the associate artistic director, but not in name. I directed shows. I worked with the artistic director at the time. And then during the crisis when the whole place fell apart, almost went out of business, I stayed.
Oh.
Many people left.
Right.
But I stayed. I was the acting artistic director.
I see. Interesting.
Yeah.
I before we get to your, artistic director, you directed a production in 2009 of The Full Monty.
Oh, yes.
With Elaine Stritch, which was one of her last performances.
Yeah, it was. We thought it was going to be her last. But
and then she went to do
Little Night Music. Yeah.
But can you tell me about that? That is.
Well, I can actually show you everybody who survived that production. We say we have our Stritch marks. Because it was painful.
Oh my God.
So here's the thing. We're doing Full Monty. I love that show.
Yeah.
We're like, who's Jeanette? Who can be Jeanette?
David Yazbek's first musical.
It's just iconic, right?
Yeah.
It's like amazing. And the casting director said, what about Elaine Stritch? And I was like, oh my God, brilliant. Like, she would be amazing. But is she going to come to Paper Mill and do it?
Yeah.
They're like, well, we got to ask her. Why not? So they call her up and ask her. I went and met with her at the where she lived at the Hotel Carlisle. And she said she wanted to do it. I gave her the script, met with her and the musical director, and she was all on board. And people say, what was it like working with Elaine Stritch? And I like to say it was unbelievable in every definition of that word.
And you didn't just work with her, you directed her.
Oh, I directed her. Yeah. It was unreal. She required so much time and attention and was so needy and was so mean to the people around her. And it took me a long time to realize how to work with her. And what it was she had a lot of self-hatred and was really insecure. And she did that by just kind of, vomiting on everybody else. Mm-hmm. And she was really talented. Like, her performance was amazing in this show, but it was so painful to everybody around her. She had a few people she latched onto that she liked, and she did like me. We used to communicate via phone. I would call her when she left rehearsal or the theater, when she was in the car before she got there, and leave her a voicemail message, and then she would voicemail message me back. Like, she didn't like a lot of conversation, but one of the ones I wish I still had on a recording was, she called me and she was like, Mark, it's Elaine. She goes, I just want to tell you that today's the first day that we really worked like actor, director together. And, I don't want to talk about this, but I just want you to know that you helped me. As an actor, you helped me. Click, hang up. And I was like, wow. I was like, Elaine Stritch. So that was it. And then I also learned that you needed to give her back what she was giving. So when she was nasty, I would be like, Elaine, stop. Just stop it. I want you to sit down on that line and don't move away from the piano till this line, and then you cross over there. And she'd be like, fine, okay, I'll do it. Right?
You noticed that in the company.
Yeah,
company
you were just talking to me about this
They had to
yesterday.
get like that with her. Yeah.
That is it. And I figured you got to yell at her. You got to give it back to her. But, she gave a...
That's crazy.
Right, she gave a performance for the ages. Now, the thing is, in rehearsal, in tech, and in previews, she never once got through that number. You know her big number?
Yeah.
Never. She would stop. She'd drop lyrics. The poor conductor, Tom Helm, would be like telling the band, go to bar 74, whatever. Right? So it's opening night. I'm standing at the back of the theater, sweating through my suit with Dennis Jones, who choreographed it. I'm like, Dennis, what's going to happen? He's like, she's going to pull it out. Don't worry about it. She's going to pull it out. I said, how do you know? He goes, because this is what she lives for. I said, okay. So opening night, right? She stumbles on a lyric, but she gets through the number, the whole number, and it ends, and the audience like leaps to their feet, standing ovation, huge applause, like people going crazy. She was great. She was great. She walks up to the piano, and she's supposed to be like standing at the piano for her next line. She's like this, like looking around and kind of getting angry. I was like, what is she doing? And like the audience it keeps going crazy, and she's like getting sort of steamed up, and she races to the front of the stage, and I thought she's gonna like yell at the audience, and she goes ah, and launches into an encore. Like halfway through the number, no one knew. She just jumps into the number. The band starts playing. The guys jump in. She does the whole thing, and there's this big joke at the end. I can't remember what the joke is. She does the joke again. The audience goes crazy. She finishes the number. She goes like, and she walks up stage to the piano, and dying. And I turn to Dennis, and I'm like, crazy like a fox. I said, she's been planning that for weeks.
Yeah,
She's been planning that for weeks. And we have it on tape. Because we do the archival. We do the archival on opening night. So people think I made up that story. It is the truth.
That is crazy.
My other favorite story, just one more, is
yeah, go for it.
in tech, I just couldn't get through stuff with her. And I was like, Elaine, you got to do this. And she, at one point, screams at the top of her lungs, I am terrified. And over the God mic, I said, yes, Elaine, we all are. Okay, let's move on to the next. Anyway, that's just who she was.
Yeah.
But she was, and when she left New York, she did that one gig at Little Night Music, and then she was moving away from New York, moving back to, I think it was Michigan, wherever she lived. Mm-hmm. And I said to Dennis, this is the end. I said, if she's not performing, she's just going to fade away. So I wrote her a letter, and I never got a response, but I like to think she got it. And I said, I just have to thank you for one of the most memorable experiences of my career. And we both know that it wasn't smooth sailing all the time, but I have to tell you that I felt respect from you as a director, and I feel like you and I created something in that moment that I will never forget and that the audience will never forget. And for that, I am incredibly grateful. And I just have to tell you thank you. I have to say thank you. And, I have a lot of love in my heart for you, Elaine. So I never heard from her, but that was months before she passed. So wow. I like to think she got it and probably read it and threw it in the trash or whatever, but I don't care. But I figured I had to do it.
Yeah. Wow. Oh my gosh, that's so sweet. From Julie Andrews to Elaine Stritch.
I know.
that's a wide margin.
Crazy. We haven't even talked about Rita Moreno or Diane Carroll. That'll be for the next.
Oh my gosh.
The next podcast.
Yeah, right. Anyway. Okay, so then the next year you become artistic director. Yeah. How did that come about?
Wasn't a good thing. During the crisis, when we were almost out of money, right, and the theater almost closed, we were $4.5 million in debt, and they were going to shut it down.
Oh my gosh!
And so everybody ran for the hills. I stayed because I thought, who's going to hire me? I'm like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do. Sure. So I started running the theater as the acting artistic director while they were doing a national search for somebody new. They wanted. There were a couple of names they kept kicking around. Sure. And they were doing a big national search, and I interviewed for it. but I didn't know if they'd, choose me. And one morning I was driving to work and somebody called me and said, "Have you seen the paper today?" Excuse me. And I said, "No." And they said, "You better pick up a paper." And there was an article in the Star Ledger where Peggy McGlone, who was a newspaper arts writer at the time, had interviewed the board of directors and said, "Look, you're doing this big national search, but Mark Hoebee is running the theater. Why aren't you just hiring Mark?" And the guy, who was nice and I liked him, said, "Look, we like Mark. We think he's a nice guy, but he's not the job. He's not the guy. He's never going to get the job." And so I came into the theater, and I called him, who was the board chair at the time, and I called one of the very high up, board members, who now is our board chair, Carolyn Ferralito, and I said, I have to quit. I have to quit. I said, "I can't. That's horrifying. I don't care if you're not going to hire me, but I can't find out about it by reading in the paper, and so I have to quit."
Yeah.
So the next day, they called this emergency board meeting, and then this guy, Ken Thorne, came to my office the next day and he said, "We have really good news for you." And I said, "What is that?" And he goes, "We want to offer you the job of artistic director."
Oh my God.
And I said, "Ken, no." I said, "That makes us both look like idiots." I said, "You just told the world you weren't going to hire me, and now you're going to hire me? I'm not going to take it." And so he said, "Well, please don't leave. Don't leave." And I said, "All right, you continue your search, and I'm going to," I had a young son at the time, and
Yeah.
I said, "I need to pay the bills, so I'll stay on for a few months, but I'm going to look." And I start looking. And then like 6 months or so went by, and they brought in a new executive director, and then they came to me and they said, "Okay, we really want you to do it. Will you do it?" And so then I said, "Yes, now I'll do it. Now I'll take it."
Right.
But yeah, it wasn't the happy thing.
Smooth sailing in the beginning.
And then I really felt like for years, and I still feel like this a little bit, not so much anymore. Every day I felt like I had to prove myself. I felt like there was this in the back of their minds. I wasn't the person they wanted. I wasn't good enough to do the job. And so I had to prove myself like every show, every day.
Wow.
And, I think one of the big things that they finally, my shows were always great, but they finally knew I had some really special acumen for the position was when I created the model that we have now about bringing in all these world premieres and commercial producers.
Mm-hmm.
And that all started with me and my personal
Oh, is that
contacts.
right?
Yeah.
Wow.
And so that is what built this new model of Paper Mill.
Yeah,
And
for
once
sure.
that started going, then, they were like, "Oh yeah, okay, we made the right choice." And then I realized I, could actually do the job.
Right. Can you tell me what goes into your job? What goes into what you do?
Well, a little bit of everything.
Mm-hmm.
So the big thing is the season, right?
Yeah.
I have to choose the season. I don't do it alone.
Yeah.
We have to do commercially enhanced projects, world premieres. Are the lifeblood of the theater. So,
Yeah.
Forging those relationships with Disney and Kevin McCollum and those people, finding those projects.
Right.
Myself and our new associate artistic director, Jen Bender.
Jen Bender's
Patrick
wonderful.
Parker
She's the
before her.
sweetest.
Yeah, she's me. We read scripts, go to readings, find all those things. So that's the backbone, right? Because that is what the theater runs on. But in addition to that, hiring creative personnel for all those shows, overseeing the auditions, overseeing
Right.
the tech rehearsal process. Then I also, I'm the artistic vision for the theater in terms of marketing. Also, I oversee education. We have an education department with a director of education, but I'm heavily involved in there. And our summer conservatory program, which has launched, Laura Benanti, Nikki James, Anne Hathaway. I teach and curate that. So anything and everything artistic in the theater, I oversee.
Wow.
And I direct shows.
I was going to say, you always direct one a season, right?
Yeah, there's only been 1 year I didn't direct one. I think the staff like that because when I'm out of the theater directing, they don't like that. But I didn't like it because, I'm an artist.
That's a big part of
I
what
like
you
doing
want to do.
Yeah. I like doing it.
I was going to ask you what goes into, to your point about deciding a season, what goes into deciding a season? What are you thinking about? You're filling, is it 5 slots?
5 slots.
And
yeah.
so when do you put your world premieres? When do you, what are you thinking about?
it's impossible. I never think, every year I think it will never come together.
How early do you start thinking about it?
We're thinking about 27 right now.
Wow.
Yeah. So
26,
27. Yeah. We're always thinking about it.
Right.
The world premieres are really the toughest part. And the reason is because, first of all, I always say, in my mind, there's probably like each year like 7 great new musicals. And everybody wants them, right?
Yeah.
And they all want to go to, Paper Mill, La Jolla, Chicago Shake, some like for their out of town tryouts.
Right.
There's lots of new musicals, but are there really good new musicals? And are they ready to hit the stage? We don't have a developmental second stage. You got to be on the main stage at Paper Mill.
Right.
So, and you need a couple $1 million to enhance the production to get it up on our stage.
Right.
So the number of shows that are actually viable for us is very small.
Wow, that's interesting. I wouldn't think that. I would think that there would be a lot of options. That's funny.
There's a lot of people who think they have musicals for our stage, but they don't necessarily match our audience or the size of our theater, which is 1,200 seats, or the budget, right? To do a basic, not basic, but to do a new musical here at Paper Mills between $3 and $4 million, right? So, and then a commercial producer has to bring a lot to the table financially. And it has to be a project that I fall in love with and that I think our audience will love. So we're always looking for those, always. Right. And then we have so many different facets of our audience. We have our, subscribers who've been here for 30, 40 years, who are 70 and 80 years old, That doesn't mean they're not going to enjoy the same thing that a 20-year-old will, but you've got to take that into account.
Right, of course.
We always need a family show at the holidays, right?
Right.
White Christmas or Annie or
Frozen,
this year, right? We want to bring in young people. We want to introduce them to the experience of being in a theater, what it's like to see a show live, and get them excited about that and bring the families in so that they keep coming back, generation after generation.
Right.
You also want the experience that you want a grandparent to be able to take a grandchild to a show. Or you want a date night. Like, what is it that the 40-something parents are going to get a sitter and come see? So it's all of those things.
I mean, that's your case, right? You've been coming here since you were a kid.
Yeah, I saw Little Shop. It was in my first professional production.
Little Shop was the first show you saw.
Yeah.
That's great. I love that show. So yeah, there's so many different pieces. And then the another big consideration for us is rights availability. Because we're so close to New York. We're within a 25-mile radius, that any show that's currently running in New York or on the road, or that somebody has an option for a first-class production, we can't get.
Right.
So I'll tell you this story. So when I first started here as the associate director, in the year 2000, they said, what is the number one show that you would like to direct? What would you like to direct? And I said, West Side Story. I said, it was the first show I ever did in community theater. I said, I choreographed it when I was just out of college. I worked with Jerome Robbins, danced that choreography on Broadway. So, that's the show I want to do. And we couldn't get the rights till 2016. It took 16 years to get the rights.
Why is that?
Well, there was a revival, there was a tour, there was another revival, so we just could not get our hands on the rights. You could do it in California, Colorado, Illinois, couldn't do it at Paper Mill.
Right.
So
and that 2016 production, did you direct that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was our former guest, Phil Colgan, was in that.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, he was in that.
And actually, we're doing it again now.
Yes, right.
10 years later.
Are you doing it?
I will be directing it.
Wow, nice.
I love that show. It's the best.
Yeah.
So that's a challenge. And then also the budget. Like, we can't do, West Side Story's 33 people, right? That's huge. And an orchestra of how many? And sets and closes. So you can't do all of those. You have to figure out, budget-wise, what you can afford. Can we do a smaller musical that plays big? Can we do a funny play? Can we collaborate with another theater to sort of cut down on the costs?
Right.
So we're always working all the angles.
To do co-productions.
Yeah,
like that's what you did at Mystic Pizza this year, right?
Mystic Pizza, yes. That was an interesting one. It was like sort of a co-production with Riverside Theater in Florida, but it also was sort of enhanced by Lively McCabe, because they're going to put out a tour. Right. So it was actually 3 entities together.
Oh, nice.
It was like when we did Hunchback. when we did Hunchback of Notre Dame, it was a co-pro with La Jolla, but it was enhanced by Disney. So there were
Yes.
3 partners on that piece.
I see.
So yeah, it's crazy complicated. We talk about it all the time. We're always talking about shows and seasons and
Yeah.
what rights are available, and can we get this one, and how do they pair together? Like the year we did Bronx Tale and West Side Story, I thought, well, we can't do the Bronx Tale. Oh, and the commercial producers have a different calendar, right? They're not on our calendar.
Right, of
They have a
course.
different track.
Right.
They, the biggest thing with the commercial productions is getting the dates to line up,
Mm-hmm.
to make sure that one of our slots matches what their creatives have available and what they want to get it to the next step.
Right.
Whether it's a tour or another regional.
I mean, you guys tend to stick to the same times of year, pretty much similar weekends.
No, we've
too,
done we've done a commercial production in.
Well, no, not for commercial production, but I mean for your
Oh,
slots.
for us, yes, we run. I say a school year from
Yeah.
September to
Right.
end of June. Yeah.
Yeah.
5 slots. So we know exactly what they are, and we can plot the calendar out for
Right,
years in
right.
advance. But they, have a
Are
different.
running on
show.
their own schedule.
But anyway, when we were doing Bronx and West Side, I was like, they're going to be in the same season. They can't be back to back.
No.
They're not the same show.
But they have
but
similar
they're
quality,
similar
the
things,
essence.
and
And the idea of forbidden love. I mean,
Right.
that's like a big part of both of those
exactly
shows.
right. Totally right. And even visually, Beowulf's design for Bronx Tale with,
Scaffolding
fire
and-
escapes
yeah.
and brownstones is
Right.
similar to West Side Story. So
Yeah.
luckily they wanted to do that show in the winter, and we wanted to do West Side in the summer. So I can't remember what show was in between, but there was some palate cleanser in between.
Right.
I think it might have been Pump Poison Dinettes, but so that people,
Yeah.
you have to think about all that too.
What goes into picking creative personnel for the shows that you guys decide? Do you pick the show first? Do you pick the creatives first?
We usually pick the show first.
Uh-huh.
But a lot of times a director will come to us and say, I really want to direct this show, and this is why, and we think they're a good match.
Oh, so you guys get pitches too?
Yeah, people pitch us all
I
the
was
time.
going to say.
They pitch us on new shows, and they pitch us on revivals. Yeah.
Right.
And
Right.
then we typically let directors choose their own creative teams. So, if, this is a bad example because Take the Lead came sort of together. But
Right.
so, like when Casey Hushin came and directed Murder on the Orient Express, or she picks her lighting designer, her costume designer.
Okay.
We do it in
Gotcha.
collaboration. Like, it's not going to be somebody that we don't know or can't vet.
Yeah.
But yeah, we want the director to realize their vision by creating a team they feel safe and comfortable with, and that they can all do their best work.
Yeah. I find it interesting because you have something like Little Mermaid coming this year,
Mhm.
and that is like it's a huge show. Everyone knows Little Mermaid, and you have JoAnn Hunter. How did that come about?
She's directing and choreographing.
Directing and choreographing.
Right.
Did she come to you with that, or does that? I mean,
No,
Right.
we went to her, and that is a production. We worked with Disney on that production
Yes.
when we launched the new version of the show. So there was the Broadway version, then it went to Europe, and then there was going to be a tour, which we were going to launch from here with Disney, and then they decided not to do a tour, but instead at least give birth to this new version of the show, new script. And all
Mhm.
that. So we built a physical production with 4 other theaters.
Wow.
So we actually partly own that physical production.
Wow.
So we don't like to repeat titles for at least 10 years.
Yeah.
So it was coming up. It was
Yeah.
10,
yeah.
I can't remember what year it was. I think we did it in 2012. So we said, okay, it's time to do Little Mermaid again. It'll be great. We haven't done it in a long time. And I wanted a female director
Yeah.
because Glenn Cassell directed it the last time. Did a great job, really great. But
Mhm.
this is a story about a young woman,
Sure.
right? It's why for like Frozen for next year I want a female director. But it's a story of 2 sisters.
Yeah.
So I was trying to think of who is a director who, a woman who could bring a woman's point of view to this story about Ariel, and we all know the story, and I've known JoAnn for years.
Yeah.
She and I made our Broadway debut together. in
No way.
Jerome
In
Robbins
Jerome
Broadway.
Robbins
Yes, we
Broadway.
did.
Oh my gosh, that's
Yes.
funny.
We've known each other for that long. And then she's choreographed shows I've directed. She directed Unmasked that we worked with
Oh, okay.
Andrew Lloyd Webber.
Sure. Yeah.
And so I thought, I'll ask her. And I said, is this something you'd be interested in? And she was like, yeah. I said, do you want to choreograph it too? So yeah, so we're right in the middle of that. And we just had callbacks on Friday.
Yes.
We have the cast offers are going out right now. And
Nice.
It's going to be exciting. So
talk to me about your relationship with Disney. Particularly, I want to start with Newsies. That was
Yeah.
the first Disney show that you were a part where you were artistic director. Am I right?
No, first we did, before that it wasn't a premiere, but it was High School Musical.
Oh yeah, because
Right,
Brittany was
right.
in. Brittany
Brittany
came on the pod.
Who cut school to come to the audition.
She sure did. She was 17. She was
Love her.
LaGuardia.
Love her to death. Yeah.
Yeah, and she's working on Mermaid now too.
She's
associate
your
choreographer.
associate.
Yeah.
But anyway, so we wanted to do High School Musical.
And that was Dennis Jones, right?
He and I did it together, but it was on the road. It was a tour directed and choreographed by Jeff Calhoun, who I knew from college. We went to Northwestern together. So I petitioned Disney to get the rights, and they at first wanted us to just book in the tour, but I said we don't do that. We're just not a touring house.
Yeah.
And so I went into interview with them about High School Musical. And I said, I love Jeff, but I would like to direct it, and I'd like to bring a new choreographer. So they let me do that.
Wow.
And it was a great show. Dennis choreographed it, and all the Disney folk came and saw it. And so they were very happy with the production. They liked Paper Mill, and so they called me in to talk about a new project. And I didn't know what it was. And I went into the office, and they said, well, there's this movie we've been working on to adapt for the stage. And wanted to know if you and Paper Mill might be interested in it. And I said, well, what is it? And they said Newsies. And I was like, oh my God. Yes, because I had seen that movie.
Right, of course.
And all I remember was thinking, this is the boy version of Annie. Right? This is boys
That's funny.
Annie.
Thought of that too.
Right?
For sure.
And I was like,
funny.
yes, dancing is great. I want to do it. So they said, we've been working with another theater and we can't get the budget to work. So if you can, we have this much money to enhance, and if you can make the budget work, we'd like to talk to you about it. I said, great. So I immediately came back here, and we called it the Hush Hush Project. We never said the word Newsies in the building until we signed the contract.
Yeah.
We had to run budgets. We had to do all this stuff. Every file was hush hush. We had meetings on the calendar of the Hush Hush Project.
Wow.
Right, blah, blah. And we were in kind of the final stages of figuring out, the mechanics and the
How to make it
finances of it. And I was having meetings with the Disney people. And at that time, we were opening Les Mis. So we launched the American tour of the new version of Les Mis.
Oh, wow.
Worked with Cameron McIntosh. He was here.
Wow.
And
Crazy.
it's crazy.
Yeah.
And he came here. This is another story.
Yeah.
He came here because I met him when Les Mis passed Chorus Line as the longest running Broadway show. I was brought in to stage a gala finale where they came out and did One Day More with the original company, Colm Wilkinson, Judy Kuhn, all that. And then it turned into one from a chorus line, and I taught them all the choreography.
Oh my gosh.
With little Les Mis hats. So
That is so
I
funny.
staged that for the gala performance. And Cameron was there and was really impressed, and I wanted to direct Miss Saigon at Paper Mill. So I had a meeting with him during those rehearsals, and he was like, why do you want to do Miss Saigon, and how are you going to do it? So he gave me the permission to do Saigon here and sent his people to see it and really liked it.
Yeah.
So when Les Mis came up, they were looking for a theater to launch the tour. A friend of mine, Seth, who worked for Networks, I said, you should launch from here. So he went to Cameron. Cameron remembered me anyway. So Les Mis launched their tour from here. That's the connection to that. So
That's funny.
anyway, fast forward, we're talking about Newsies, blah, 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 blah. And Les Mis opens here on a Sunday night. Big, huge hit. Tuesday, I get a phone call from the Disney people, and they said, well, you have a very big fan who is just in our offices. I was like, oh, who's that? They said, Cameron McIntosh. And I said, oh, because I forgot they did Mary Poppins together.
Oh, right, of course.
Which was
Oh my
running.
gosh,
at
that was called
time.
like Cameron McIntosh's Mary Poppins.
Which was running at that time at the
Okay.
Newsies room.
Okay.
And he said, well, he was just in our offices and was just talking about what a great experience he had at Paper Mill and how much he
Wow.
enjoyed working with you. And so why don't you come in and we'll sign the contract for Newsies.
Wow.
I know.
See, you really never know how these things like intertwine and connect. I mean, it's kind of like magic.
You
That is-
never know.
Yeah.
Here's another crazy one. So, Bronx Tale,
Yeah.
right? So that was Michael David and the Dodgers were doing a Bronx Tale. And I didn't even know they were looking for a regional theater.
Mhm.
And I get an email from Michael David. Okay,
Uh-huh.
like prolific Broadway producer.
Yeah.
I remember watching him in his red Converse sneakers, accepting Tony Award after Tony Award. And it's this email saying, "Dear Mark, I don't know if you know me, but my name is Michael David. I'm a producer in New York City." I'm like, "What?"
Mm.
He goes, "We're producing a new musical called The Bronx Tale. I wonder if you'd be interested in talking about it, blah, blah." So I was like, yeah, I immediately like get on the phone to him. He didn't realize that he had produced the Guys and Dolls tour that I was in, so I'd worked with him. So I go in to meet with him. He tells me the whole story. He gives me the material, walks away. And I said, "This is amazing." I said, "I'm so excited. I can't wait to read the material."
Yeah.
I said, "But I'm just wondering, what prompted you to send me that email?" And he goes, "Oh, Alan." I said, "Alan Menken?" He goes, "Yeah." "Who's the composer?" He goes, "Alan, and has done so many shows with you." And he said, "Have you talked to Mark Hoebee?" "Why talk to Mark Hoebee?" So it was Alan Menken told Michael David, "You should look at Paper Mill to do a
For a
Bronx
Bronx
Tale."
Tale.
And that's how
Yeah.
Bronx Tale happened.
Right.
So
Right.
look, what's the message of this whole podcast? Never burn a bridge.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
for
you
sure.
never know who's in the room who's going to get you to the next.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
So
for
anyway,
sure.
I had forgot where we were
Newsies.
talking about.
We were
Oh, so
talking about
Newsies.
how when Newsies. So we had Tommy Bracco on, and he was talking a lot about the fact that Newsies was not meant to transfer
No.
to Broadway. It was
never,
really
no.
meant to be this production, maybe a tour, licensing.
No, not even a tour.
Not even.
It was to go to licensing. They were going to do it just like High School Musical.
Mhm.
There was such demand, and everybody was doing these non-licensed versions. Every summer camp was doing Newsies, right?
Oh.
And
wow.
so they figured they would write it and do it for real. So they were just going to mount it for Paper Mill.
Wow.
Then when we were in rehearsal and when they were designing it, they started thinking about maybe touring it.
Okay.
Because the set was already being built, and they were
Uh-huh.
like, "Can the set tour?" And we were like, "Sure." Yeah, I mean, when you build a set to tour, it's built specifically.
Right,
So
right,
anyway,
of course.
We're like, "Well, sure, anything can tour." But they really didn't have plans for it. It was just going to go to licensing, but it was such a hit here. And Nick Scandelius from the Nederlander organization came and saw it, and they moved it right into the Nederlander Theater. So it opened here in October, and it opened on Broadway in February.
Wow.
And that really was the show. That
Oh my
sort of
gosh, that's a quick turnaround, huh? That's
major.
Wow.
The only other one that's done that's Gatsby. Same
Yeah.
thing. They opened in November and opened
In the same
here
season.
in April. They
Yeah.
opened in April.
Yeah.
But Newsies was the show that sort of put the gold star on Paper Mill as a place for out-of-town tryouts,
Right.
as the ability, that you can open a show there and move it into New York. You're not going to be overexposed. And then now I think we've done 7 projects with Disney. But that really was the key to unlocking the door to a lot of producers looking at Paper Mill as a really viable out-of-town tryout. And for me, what I always say is to commercial producers is there's 2 huge advantages to opening your show at Paper Mill. One, the actors live at home in New York.
Right.
So you don't have to fly out of town,
Yep.
save all that money on per diem, putting people up in hotels, transferring. That's like millions of dollars.
That's a huge
huge
benefit.
thing. And the other thing is, if you're trying to find an audience that's going to react like a New York audience will, the closest you're going to get is in
For
New
sure,
Jersey.
yeah.
So you can try a show in San Francisco, Seattle, Chicago, all great cities, amazing, but they're not the same type of audience as New York. And ours isn't exactly the same, but like 75 or 80% of our patients go to New York
Are going
too.
to see Broadway shows.
So
yeah.
you're going to get similar reactions. So,
yeah, for sure.
But yeah, that Newsies was the key, was
Yeah.
the biggie.
Yeah. So in the spirit of original shows, right now you have an original show
Take
on.
the lead.
By the time this podcast comes out, you probably have like around a week of the run left. Talk about Take the Lead. Talk about how Take the Lead. I feel like Take the Lead was talked about for a while
Yeah.
because in terms of workshops, they were constantly auditioning people.
Yeah.
It was this big choreographed thing. Ballroom meets breakdancing. That was a lot of what I was hearing, and I was stoked. Didn't know that it was based on a movie or anything.
Or a true story.
Yeah, or a true story. That I found out when I saw the show. yeah, so I knew, like, I'd heard about the Antonio Banderas. I was like, oh, okay, that's like the only association I even had with the movie.
Yeah.
But when I heard that Paper Mill was taking this, I was like, because it felt like a talk of the town. Like everybody was talking about it in its workshops. So yeah, talk about how that came to
Well,
you.
the project's been around for, I guess, 10 years they've been writing.
Wow, no way.
And I
Oh my
learned
gosh.
about it about 5 years ago because Chris Catelli, he choreographed Newsies for us.
Newsies, yeah.
But he and I, going back to that Guys and Dolls tour, we were dancers at the same time, right?
You guys were in the tour.
We were not in the tour at the same time. He had left the tour, but when I went in the tour, they didn't have clothes for me, so I wore his shoes. So I kept them for years. I tell them I still have your shoes in my closet. It's
Wow.
C. Catelli. But anyway, so we've been friends and buddies like a lot, and we've talked about a bunch of projects that have never come to the stage. But like 5 years ago, I said, "What are you working on? What are you doing?" He goes, "Well, I'm working on this new show, Take the Lead." And I said, "Tell me more about it." And he told me about the story in the Antonio Banderas movie, which I went out and watched, and Mad Hot Ballroom, which was the documentary. And I said to him, "You have to bring that show to Paper Mill." He was like, "It's not even ready yet. We're not ready." I said, "I know, but when you're ready, it has to come to Paper Mill because it is about, the true story of Pierre Dulaine,
Yes.
who created Dancing Classrooms,
Right.
which was bringing ballroom dance into it started as middle schools in the New York City public school system to teach kids respect, self-respect, respect for each other, and a way to work and bond as a unit, right, through ballroom dance. Seems crazy.
Yeah.
And then it, moved to high schools, and internationally over 700,000 students have participated in this program.
Wow.
And for me, it was an amazing match of high quality Broadway caliber musical theater with this incredible creative team and arts education.
Yeah.
And those are the two things that Paper Mill does.
Mm-hmm.
That sprinkle in access autism friendly, that's who Paper Mill is, right?
Mm-hmm.
But those two pieces together, I was like, we have to do this show. So every time I saw Chris anywhere at a party, at an opening, I was like, what's going on with Take the Lead? He was like, it's not ready, it's not ready. So he sent me an early draft of it, and I read it, went to a reading, and he said, it's not ready, but you can come see it. And then there was another presentation when Eva Price had come on as the commercial producer. And I said, at that show, before I even walked in, I was like, I want to do this show. I haven't even seen it yet.
Yeah.
And so I saw one of the workshops, I think maybe 2 years ago, I can't even remember.
Yeah.
And was just blown away. I mean, it's incredible because the story's great. This guy who, takes these kids who are, like most high school kids are, in the thick of adolescence and can't figure themselves or each other out, and uses ballroom dance to bring them together. But the fusion of the ballroom and the hip-hop choreography is so energetic and powerful. I've never seen it before.
I've never seen it before.
Where you see this really hardcore, incredible hip-hop choreography by Jen Weber of Ann Juliet, right?
Yes.
Amazing choreographer, dancer. Hardcore hip-hop, and then really competitive ballroom dancing by Maria Torres. Like they're ballroom champions on our stage right now. One of the women who's in the show missed the last, I think it was 3 days in the studio, which you think is crazy. Those are the studio run-throughs, but she was out. She's like, I gotta go. She went to, I think it was Utah, to defend her national championship. She's an 8-time national champion ballroom dancer.
One of the cast members is on Dancing with the Stars.
Yes, right. So, plus, so that alone, amazing. But watching how those two styles start out at the beginning of the show completely separate.
Yeah.
Competition, world-class ballroom dancing, incredible hip-hop choreography.
Yeah.
And then by the end of Act 1, they start to cross over. And then by the end of the show, in the competition, you almost can't discern when the Drake kids are doing their competition choreography. What's hip-hop, what's ballroom, what's theater dance. So there are really 3 choreographers.
Yeah.
It's Jen, Maria, and Chris.
Yeah.
And the story's so strong, and this incredible score by Zineeb Banow and Ellie Heifetz, and it's a great book by Rob Carey and Jonathan Tollins. I mean, really, really talented people, and just a killer cast. It's just amazing. And it's one of the best opening numbers I have ever seen on our stage or in any musical. I want to watch it every night. It's so, it opens up with this hardcore ballroom, and you're like, what the heck is that? And then all of a sudden the hip hoppers burst onto the stage, and then they're dancing in and out and through each other. It's like, it's one of the most energetic, powerful musical theater openings I've ever seen, and totally sets up the show, right?
Yeah.
Ballroom versus
It does.
this.
It absolutely does.
It's don't miss it. Get your tickets.
Yeah, right. I want to talk about the show now too, because we saw it last week and I'm coming back to see it. It was so invigorating. I'm holding my sister's arm going, because I'm like holding my breath watching that opening number.
Yeah.
Like, to your point about that opening number, it is. And there's this moment where you're watching the ballroom dancers come downstage, and they storm in downstage, and then they do this drop, and the ballroom dancers go under them, and they're sliding, and then the hip hop dancers come and hop over them.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
It was one of the. I was like, oh my gosh, because it was a surprise. It was everything. It was everything. And then Act 2, and I told Chris this when we saw the show, because we saw it right before you guys opened, and. There was the Act 2, a crux of Act 2 is the ballroom competition, and what you're seeing is your students, your leads, the characters that you've been watching the whole time, and they're not as advanced as the ballroom dancers, obviously, but between the lighting and the way Chris directed it, you're watching them. And your eyes, even though there's these professional, renowned ballroom dancers right there, your eyes are for some reason going toward your leads, and it's a lighting thing, and also their hair downstage, and it's just like, it's so clever, it's so exciting.
It's also the way the show is written. You root for those kids.
Yeah.
You learn, you know each one of them. Egypt, Gucci, Monster, Caitlin, you know their stories. Lola, my favorite.
Yes.
Curd, right? Like,
Yeah.
Lola's sassy, right? She's
Yeah.
a sassy gal.
Yeah.
But, you know, you invest in them. So at the end, you are rooting for them so hard. So
Yeah.
I feel a little bad for the ballroom dancers because they are killing themselves, but the audience is really watching Gucci and Kurt.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah.
But so sometimes I will not even look at the Drake kids. I'll just watch the ballroom dancers.
Yeah.
And they are not only dancing up a storm, but acting up a storm.
Right.
Stephanie Sosa, who does the Mambo and one of the other ones, she is like throwing shade over at Lola and it's the samba. Takes 3 to samba. Right? She's like, what's going on? I mean, like, they're acting up a storm. But
it is awesome.
it's
And you should know too, because I'm a breakdancer, so a lot of us were going in for this show, and it's like musical theater. And some of these people that I was going in for the show with are breakdancers who've never done musicals. Their agents send them in, they're more commercial,
Right.
hip hop, things like that. But they're talking about this show from an advanced level, not from like a poo-pooing it, from like a breakdancing is on stage in a musical. You know, I mean, it's never, there's hip hop and there's a big, influx of hip hop now on Broadway and whatnot, but breakdancing and the way that it's there and the way you're seeing people do freezes and they're on the floor, it's not been in a musical.
I think the same thing about the ballroom, because we were talking about that too. I said, we've all danced a waltz and we've done ballroom choreography, but not competitive ballroom.
Yeah.
Not this style and this sophisticated and this difficult. I don't think there's I can't think of another show that's had this level of ballroom dance and this level of, like you're saying, legit hip-hop choreography and the fact that they're together. And I know exactly that moment you're talking about.
Yeah.
The Drake kids freezing and the four ballroom couples
Break
come
through.
down, they go crazy, and the girls slide across the front and boys jump over and you're like, what's happening?
Yeah, it's mind-blowing, and
But
you should catch it at Paper Mill, and if you don't, I really hope it transfers. I really do.
I think it has all the elements of being a huge success. And,
I think so too.
Fingers crossed it'll make
Yeah, here's hoping. I want to talk to you about this upcoming season that you have. You have, for those who don't know, you're starting off with the premiere, Bull Durham. Frozen for your holidays. Come From Away is the first show of 26. 1776, and then you're closing it out with West Side Story. Tell me about Bull Durham. It's a big movie.
Bull Durham, and that's a project that's been kicking around for a long time. I was going to say for a long time. It's been around.
And they did a version with Carmen Cusack, right?
Carmen will be here too.
Oh, really? Oh, nice.
In fact, it was kicking around for a while. There was one creative team, then it switched. There were a couple of workshops. I saw an early workshop of it. I liked it. Mark Bruni, who did Gatsby for us, is on it now. Josh Burgas from Smash. Yeah. And there was actually a production in Durham. I mean, it's Bull Durham, the Durham Bulls, right? Yeah. So, and Lauren Kennedy, who is an actress, and I know from back in the day, she's much younger than me. So she's a producer and owns a theater down in Raleigh, and they were producing Bull Durham. They did it on campus at Duke University, and so Chris Slavic, our associate producer, and I flew down to see it for Mark and for the show itself, and it's great.
Yeah,
it delivers. It's so successful in that it delivers all those things you remember about the film, but breaks out into its own musical personality as well. The choreography by Josh is amazing. Carmen Cusack and Nick Walker, who did it down there, are going to do it for
Nick
us
Walker
up here. So yeah, it's
cool.
It's really good. Really
Yeah,
good.
I'm looking forward to that. It's a baseball, right? That's
I'm not your sports guy, but I hear it'll be running when the World Series happens.
Oh, is that right?
Yes.
Oh, look at that.
That's
Okay.
why we put it at the beginning of the year in September.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
So yeah, and there are 4 minor league teams in New Jersey. We're trying to get like each one of them like a week of I don't know what their names,
and whatnot.
whatever.
Yeah,
they are.
sure. Well, incredible.
Cool.
Yeah, looking forward to that. Frozen. Have you announced who's doing Frozen yet?
No,
Is
we
that
haven't talked about Frozen.
Okay,
yet.
okay.
We haven't announced that team or any of the cast.
Okay, sure. That's a big deal. That's a huge show. Everyone loves
Disney,
Frozen.
it's great. It really is a good show, and I saw it in New York and I really liked it. Then I saw the tour, which they did some little tweaks and changes and really made it so much better, focused really on the story of these 2 sisters and their relationship. I thought it was much stronger.
It's been running on the West End for
Great.
a while too
Yeah.
now. It's been on the West End for a minute, I think.
Yeah.
With Samantha
Smith
Barks.
Yeah.
Come From Away was a huge hit. It was on for years on Broadway. It's such a special show. It's on Apple TV now. The Pro Shot.
I think also really important, given what's happening in the world today and in Washington D.C., that we have to remember that Canada, they're our closest neighbors and some of the warmest people, most welcoming people you could ever imagine, and how this town of just a few hundred people welcomed, I think it was like 18,000 foreigners, and they became, an instant family.
And it's also
a great
that
message.
show speaks so much to unity, I think, in a way that is kind of amazing.
It's so
And,
funny that, yes, the impetus for it are the events of 9/11, but the story rises above that. It's about people helping others in need and in the middle of a tragedy. And it's almost those story points about 9/11 are less important than what the human-to-human relationships and contact and support are. That's why I think it's so good.
Yeah, and that's why I think it ran for as long as it did too.
Yeah.
1776. Tell me the inspiration behind 1776.
Well, it is the semi-sesquicentennial. It's the
Oh,
250th
yeah, that's
anniversary
right.
of the
That's
sign.
right.
So I booked
2026.
those rights 2 years ago, thinking,
That's
okay,
funny,
in
2026,
2026 we got to do 1776.
Right,
So
150 years.
yeah, so I think, and the last time we did it was a long time ago. We programmed it in that same spring slot, and it was the year Barack Obama was running for president, and I thought, wow, if he wins, the country's going to be in one mood, and if he doesn't win, the country's going to be in another mood. But in either mood they're in, they need to remember how the country was formed and what the ideals were and what the hopes were about this new nation. And I feel that like 1,000% more now.
I think too, with this new revival that just came, what was it, something like 2 years ago, the show, it speaks to the fact that the show is really good.
Yeah.
Like the show itself is a very good show, so you can do a lot with it, and there's and it has this like golden age, really beautiful score, and he plays the violin.
Yeah. It's that the one they did with the female cast in New York was a departure. We're going to do a more traditional version of the show, but you're right. It's one of those shows that is so well written. Yeah. You all know going in what happens, right? We're sitting here today.
Yeah, right.
They signed the declaration, but in Act 2, I'm nervous every
the
night.
Stakes
like,
are so high.
Are they going to get enough votes? What's going to happen?
Yeah.
Are they going to actually get to it? Like, that's a good musical.
Yeah, it is, and the stakes feel so high. Yeah, the book scenes are so strong.
So good. It's a play with music almost.
Yeah, right. West Side Story. You're directing West Side Story. What are you thinking about going into this production of West Side Story that's different than the one you did 10 years ago?
Well, I'm thinking that, first of all, the one that I did 10 years ago was probably one of the best shows I've ever directed.
Oh, really?
Best cast, best everything. And I thought, I said to myself that I would never direct another production. I said, that was it. That was like the best.
Your peak.
I don't know that I can repeat that or even want to. And then when it came back around, I thought, oh, it's time again. I thought, I want to do it again. I love the show. I think it's one of the best written musicals of all time.
Right, of course.
And I said, it is the show that again needs to remind us about what the immigrant experience is, why America is strong. The strength of America comes from our differences, that unless you are an indigenous person, you are an immigrant. If you're not, if your lineage didn't come from the Native American people, you are an immigrant.
Right.
You are a foreigner.
Yes.
At one point, your family was the other, the outsider. I'm Irish.
Yep.
Our people were spit on, and originally it was East Side Story, and it was the Irish versus the Jews. That's what it was, right? So, it is important for us to remember that what makes America strong is that we are a country of immigrants who come from all over the world, seeking refuge, seeking the opportunity to begin anew, to realize dreams, to grow families, to do all of those things, and then to work together. And yes, it's a tragedy. It's based on Romeo and Juliet. We all know the story. But what's beautiful about the show is that at the end there is a spark of hope that that these young people have learned that they've made a mistake and that they need to open their eyes and realize that only together can we, truly be happy and succeed. And so it seemed like the perfect ending to the season and the perfect message after 1776, which is how the country was formed. Right. West Side Story is the immigrant experience, how the country grew. Yeah. And just some of the best dancing of all time.
Of course, of all time. Yeah,
Sure.
that's so special.
Yeah.
Okay, we have just a couple more questions for you. I want to know if you have any advice for actors who are going in to audition for you when they're coming in for Paper Mill, coming in for you in particular when you're directing. What are you thinking? And especially geared towards dancers.
Okay. When I was a dancer, I used to walk in, never had a problem with the dance audition, but walking in front of the table to sing or read, I always felt like the people on the other side of the table were like the enemy and like I had to win the war, right?
Yeah.
When you sit on the other side of the table, you don't realize how desperate and eager we are for you to be good. We want everybody to be good. We are rooting for you. We want 17 Elsas to choose from, right? There should not be tension, negativity, animosity, which was always in my own mind, right? Because we want people to come in and want to work at Paper Mill and be so good that we have lots of choices. Right. Carolee Carmelo, who's a good friend, said to me something that I wish I had known years and years ago. I said, how do you get through it? How do you get through the audition? She goes, the way I think about it is, going into the room, I think, all of you behind the table, you have a problem. Right? Your problem is you need to cast this show. I may be the answer. Now, I may not. I'm going to show you what I can do. And if I can help you out, great, we're going to work together. And I thought that is a brilliant attitude. Yeah. And that's the way we want people to walk in. We want them to feel comfortable, good. We know not everybody's an ace dancer or an ace singer, right? You're not looking for that. We're looking for people who want to work, who are passionate. And we want to work with people. I always say this. I have to fall a little bit in love with everybody we cast. Because we're going to spend a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of effort and energy to create this show. And then we want you to keep coming back. Right. So, again, back to that never burn a bridge thing. Theater's a very small world.
And if the right fit feels more important than the talent.
It is. There are so, okay, you sort of get to the point in New York and a phase of the auditions where everybody can dance and everybody can sing. Right. And there's lots of people who can do the show. Right? So there's going to be a certain spark, a certain something, or, that we have somebody else who looks just like you, right? So we can't cast you and we don't need twins. So people say this all the time, unless we're doing Sideshow.
I was going to say, unless you're doing Sideshow.
People say this all the time, but I really do believe it. The majority of the time, if you get to the end that you don't book a show, has nothing to do with your talent. It's a million other things. We hire union and non-union. That's a budget thing. That's a contract thing. We need those slots. Sometimes one of the best people in the room doesn't get the job because we need a non-union person to fill that slot.
That's a big part of what Phil was talking about as well.
And we all started as non-union people. We all worked as non-union. So that's the way you get to it. So
And there also does feel like this rapport amongst people who've worked at Paper Mill where they always want to go back. I mean, there's a reason. I hope so. And Brittany came and when Brittany was on the podcast, she was talking a big part of that. I mean, she's been here 7 or 8 times doing shows, and she loves it here. And I've never heard a bad story about anyone who worked here. You know what I mean? Bad story from anyone who's worked here. So
not everybody loves it here.
Sure, but most. Maybe Elaine Stritch. That's probably the.
No, but look again. It's like you said. It's a match. Some people don't like the commute. Sure. Some people want to go home between shows. Some people, but then you can't do that if you're in La Jolla or Chicago either, right? Yeah, right. So the fact that everybody doesn't love or want to work here, doesn't matter to me as much as the people who are here want to be here.
Yes.
And that's what I admire and respect and love. And you can walk down the halls and just they most of the people here love each other. They love hanging out by the brook, getting the Millburn Deli, and
right.
going to the Short Hills Mall.
Yeah, right. Okay, we do a segment on this podcast. Have you ever played with AI at all?
Very little.
Okay. So I asked AI. This is AI Want to Be Like You. That's the
Okay.
podcast is called. I Want to Be Like You. So we asked AI to craft a little paper mill trivia.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and
Wow.
some of it is actually much easy, and some of it we've talked about in the middle of this podcast. So you're gonna know a lot of answers. Okay. So let's start. We have the first question: when did Paper Mill officially open its doors to play its first performance?
November 1938.
Great. Do you know for extra points the show?
Kingdom of God.
Wow. All right. Boom. Off to a good start. Boom. Okay. Great. What major event nearly ended Paper Mill's run in 1980?
Oh, it was a fire.
He's right. January 14th. Can you tell me that one?
I don't know the date, but I know it was set by a volunteer fireman to impress a woman who walked in the box office, and it got out of control. He actually helped put it out and then went to jail.
Oh my God.
And didn't get the girl.
That's the worst part of the story, isn't it? Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
Batting 1,000 so far.
Yeah, you're doing great.
Let's see.
Okay, this one's pretty easy. I knew the answer to this one. What Paper Mill production was broadcast nationally on PBS's Great Performances?
There were two.
1999.
Is it Showboat or Crazy for You?
It's Crazy for You.
There you go. They both were broadcast.
Yeah, it's Crazy for You.
Yeah.
It's funny. There's multiple choice options, but I haven't even given him that.
No,
He
yeah.
doesn't need it. Okay, and also apparently, according to AI, it got an Emmy nomination. That PBS Great Performances of Crazy for You
Oh,
got
yeah.
an Emmy
That was
nomination.
Susan Stroh stuff. Yeah, she's great.
Yeah. This one's an easy one. What actress I'm not even gonna say. What actress known from A Princess Diaries trained at Paper Mill's youth programs?
Anne Hathaway. I just watched the movie Devil Wears Prada last night because I'm going to see
Did you?
the musical in the UK next week.
Oh, you're going to see it in the UK? That's awesome. Yeah, Anne Hathaway. She talked about it on Jimmy Kimmel.
She still talks, but she did her Paper Mill Players song. She was in the Children's Theater Touring Group.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
And during the crisis, she came back when we almost went out of business and sang at a benefit. She was great.
Oh,
She's amazing.
That's very sweet.
Yeah.
Gotta get her back on the stage.
We'd like to have her in the
Nice.
audience.
Yeah, that too. Okay, this one's a little tricky. What was the last show that premiered at Paper Mill to win a Tony Award? Like the most recent. Feels almost like a trick question.
Yeah. Gatsby. Because it was Linda Cho for costumes.
Yes, that's right. See, I thought you were gonna say that was great. See, I thought you were gonna say bandstand. That's
I was
where my brain
looking
went to right
farther
away.
back. Yeah, I was thinking farther back.
In my head, I was thinking bandstand for choreo, and then I was like, oh wait, no, Gatsby won for costumes. So it was kind of a trick question. There it is. That's AI Want to Be Like You.
Oh, that was it?
That was all we got. That was all we had.
Score.
You were better than AI. Okay, we ask this question every time. We're big into manifestation. Give me a dream guest. Manifest a dream guest to be sitting in this chair.
What you should?
Yeah, to talk with me.
Oh.
And we'll invite you back.
Julie Andrews.
Oh! Wow.
Why not?
Julie Andrews, yeah. Gosh.
Never know. Or Anne Hathaway would be
Or
good
Anne
too.
Hathaway. Yeah, I would love that.
Bring them together.
I was gonna
Princess
say
Diaries.
we'll bring it
Princess
together
Diaries.
and then we'll shoot it here.
Amen.
Yeah. When they do Princess Diaries 3.
Yeah.
Okay, our last question. We ask this question every time. We started by asking you who your I Want to Be Like You as a kid was. Who is your I Want to Be Like You now? Doesn't have to be a celebrity. It could be someone in your family. It could be whoever you want.
Who do I want to be like? Oh my gosh.
It's a hard question. It's weighted.
It is. There's a lot of career people that, that are really successful. Tom Schumacher,
Right.
Alan Menken, all those people. But I think that I'll answer it a different way.
Mm-hmm.
It's not who I want to be. It's who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I've said this a lot. I've done a lot in my life and in my career, worked with a lot of famous people, done all that. But the best job I ever had was being a father I'm lucky enough to have 2 kids, and so who I want to be is the best dad that you can be. And so I've said, if I leave this earth and my kids know that they were loved, which they do, they should, because I tell them every day, then I'm successful. So that's who I want to be. I want to be the best.
Special.
The best dad.
That's really special. I love that. Thank you so much for this. This is a real treat. We're so lucky to be here shooting at Paper Mill. It's awesome, and we look forward to all things Paper Mill. And go see Take the Lead. Go see Little Mermaid.
Yeah.
Yay! Thank you.
I Want to Be Like You with Elbi Cespedes is produced by Elbi and Christian Cespedes. Special thanks to Angelina Cespedes, Kirsten Blue Kaiser, Kyle Osmond, and of course, Mark Hoebee.